united on making sure that we support the people that are possibly losing their jobs coming up in the GM plant, and again, all their suppliers. A couple of the areas is job sharing. Typically the smaller companies may not have enough work for a 40-hour week, so they have two choices. They either lay the employee off or they cut their hours down, for example, down to 20 hours. What we're going to implement is that they can work the 20 hours and then they'll be allowed to collect EI. We're also asking the federal government to extend EI another 5 additional weeks, from 45 to 50 weeks. We're going to do everything we can to work hand in hand with the mayor. I just had a conversation with the mayor, which is going to be chair on the weekend of Durham Region, and elect mayor. Had a conversation with both of those gentlemen and just reassured them I'll be heading out to Oshawa, speaking to the people, making sure that they know that we're gonna rebuild Oshawa. And I'm really proud to say the great job the mayor has done over the last number of years by diversifying Oshawa into different sectors. But again, this is devastating. It's devastating to the spouses of the workers, the people that are home, their children, wondering, what's the next step? Well, we've put a deployment we call it the SWAT team, to make sure that we focus on the people there until they can get employed, they can get proper training. So we're going to be heading out there with our ministers, and we won't leave. We won't leave until everyone is taken care of. And I don't care if it's weeks, months, a year, but we'll make sure that people can stand back up on their feet. And break down the layoffs. There's 2,600, what I understand, what I've been told by the president of GM, which I received a phone call yesterday afternoon to advise us. The first thing I said to him, is there anything we can do as a province? Absolutely anything. And asked him numerous times, and the answer was, no, there's nothing. Basically, the ship has already left the dock. They didn't ask for anything. So are we disappointed? Yeah, we're disappointed in GM. We supported GM, as everyone remembers, years ago when they were in trouble. The mayor told me that Oshawa, in the late 1800s, actually loaned the McLaughlin family, who was running GM, $50,000. So our history goes back 100 years with General Motors. And to say we're disappointed is an understatement. It's an understatement that GM Oshawa was one of the best producing car companies in the entire world, out of all car companies. So I sit back and I have to wonder. This decision wasn't made in the last few months or last 4 or 5 months. This was made well over a year ago for their global restructuring. And I asked myself, why couldn't we be one of the winners? Did we not create an environment here at the province to attract companies, to keep them here? Again, my focus is going to be with the people. I'm going to pass it over to our minister here.
I would just like to reiterate some of the comments made by the Premier. I was on the call yesterday afternoon when we received word from GM Canada that they were pulling the plug on the Oshawa facility. The Premier did ask numerous times if there was anything the province could do to keep that facility open, and the answer was a resounding no, that the decision had been made, that the era of building cars and trucks in Oshawa appears to be over by General Motors. So it's really disappointing, and our hearts go out to all of those who work at the GM facility. My father-in-law worked at GM for about 20 years until taking an early retirement in one of the restructurings that was taking place a couple of years back. I know that people from all across central Ontario and the GTA traveled into Oshawa every day to work at that facility over the last 100 years to to make cars and trucks. I think one of the things that was made evidently clear yesterday was that sales are down when it comes to sedans for General Motors, and that's part of the reason why GM Oshawa will not continue to function. We do have a couple of other facilities in Ontario that are going to remain open, hopefully for a long term, but we did receive assurance yesterday that the CAMI facility in Ingersoll would continue to operate. They make terrains and Equinox at that facility. The St. Catharines engine plant would continue to operate, and the technology centers in Markham and in Oshawa would continue to operate, and GM would continue to maintain their Canadian headquarters at the facility in Oshawa. So we want to ensure that we're creating the environment where the jobs that do remain with General Motors in Ontario continue to stay in Ontario, and we do whatever we can to create an environment where they can expand those facilities and who knows, someday possibly even start up again on the Oshawa footprint that exists. But I think this speaks to 15 years of mismanagement, and the writing has been on the wall for quite some time. Certainly the Premier and I have heard the alarm bells ringing, not just when it comes to General Motors, but other manufacturers in Ontario, and that's why over the last 5 months, we've done literally everything that we can as the new government of Ontario to create an environment where businesses not only want to come and locate here, but continue the operations that we have in Ontario. And we've taken aim at the carbon tax, the federal carbon tax. We've taken aim at soaring electricity costs by trying to get those under control in the tax structure that exists in Ontario to try and make this the envy of jurisdictions across North America for companies to come and locate, and more importantly, to sustain the jobs that we have here in Ontario.
Premier, what kind of corporate welfare would you like to offer GM companies to pay over?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
What kind of money or corporate welfare would you prepared to offer GM?
Well, that's hypothetical. I asked him very simply, is there anything we can do? And I was shot down not once, numerous times. What I think this goes back to as well is creating an environment for companies to open up here. And I asked the Prime Minister, I'll ask him again, the Prime Minister and President Trump, you have to take these tariffs away. They're hurting both countries. The steel and the aluminum tariffs, that 25% on steel, 10% on aluminum, it doesn't make either side competitive. It actually hurts both countries because, as some of you may be aware of, parts, Oshawa plant for instance, parts can go back and forth across the border 5, 6, 7 times for a door. I went to a company that manufactures doors, and it would go back and forth 6 or 7 times. So every time it goes back and forth, they get dinged 25%. You can't sustain this. You can't sustain part manufacturers being hit 25% every time it goes across the border. Well, one at a time here. I'm sorry. Well, I'm getting those figures right now. I asked the federal government, along with our government, is there any outstanding debts that is owed to us? So I will have that answer today, and I'm not too sure when the federal government will get back to us. But I just want to make myself clear about the federal government. We aren't pointing fingers anywhere, federal, provincially, or municipally. We're devastated for the families that have been affected by this, and we're going to work hand in hand with our federal counterparts, and I'll be seeing the Prime Minister, I think, next week in Montreal or the week after to discuss some of these issues. Yes, I'm sorry. Well, first of all, I'm going to be meeting with the mayor and the chair of Durham Region. I had an opportunity last night to speak to Jerry Diaz, and he's extremely concerned. He's agreed as well to work hand in hand with the province and the federal government to do everything we can.
Premier, the announcement from GM this morning said the move reflects their desire to move towards clean technology, zero emissions. Do you think the province under your government has done enough to welcome clean, green technology?
Well, absolutely. What I understood from Travis, the president of GM Canada, this is a global initiative right across the board. Their technology was geared 80% for a traditional car, gasoline car, and 20% electric cars. What I understand, they're flipping it around now. They're going to focus 80% on electric cars, 20% on traditional vehicles. But I shouldn't even use the word cars because, as the minister mentioned, right across the board in all companies, sedans, people just aren't buying sedans any longer. So we're going to work with them. Well, you know something, that's that's a question that I can't answer right now because I have a car that drives me around. I try to escape in my car sometimes, but to ask you what we own, my family, we have a GM car in our driveway, we have a Ford car in our driveway, we have an Audi in our driveway, so we don't look at one car company or another. So.
When a profitable company like General Motors tells you there is nothing you can do to stop these job losses, what does that say for your strategy to try to bring manufacturing jobs back to Ontario and stop manufacturing jobs from fleeing? If a profitable company says there is nothing you can do, what can you do?
Well, again, you know as well as I do, and CBC knows that this decision wasn't made in the last few months. It was made well over a year ago for the global strategy moving forward. But it's very simple. We're lowering the corporate tax from 11.5% to 10.5%. We're doing everything we can to lower the electricity costs because when I traveled around the province, the number one issue was the electricity costs. And do you know what was right beside that? Was Bill 148. That was a hindrance on companies across the board. Thousands and thousands of people lost their jobs because of Bill 148. So we're bringing in friendly labor laws that will benefit the frontline worker along with the employers. We're going to cut the regulations. There's 380,000 regulations in this province. We have a team together going through item by item to get rid of these regulations because regulations, as I was told by one of the big banks, that's even more important than reducing taxes. So the red tape and regulations we're going to cut down. We have to create an environment. I kept saying over the election, and I think some people may have ignored our warning, that 300,000 jobs, manufacturing jobs, were lost in 15 years in Ontario. We're competing worldwide. Worldwide right now. We're competing against Joe down the street any longer. We're competing against the U.S., against India, against China, against Europe. So we have to make ourselves competitive here. Next question. Go ahead.
For previous governments to spend billions bailing out GM, and is this a cautionary tale?
You know something, I think in 2008, you may be surprised on my answer here. I think they needed the support. To the extent they got it, again, I wasn't involved, but it kept them moving forward. And what I understand, and I could be wrong, but they paid back a majority of the money. We ended up cashing in our shares, but I'm going to get the numbers for you to see if there's anything that I'm not aware of.
You talked about other jobs that might be lost. Some of those might be a dealership. Would you like to see the federal government intervene in helping save dealerships if that's something that's needed?
Well, again, we're going to have to let the market dictate. I do want to sit down and talk further with the Prime Minister. We're going to be in constant communication to support that region, but we have to diversify. And you know something, we are attracting new jobs here. Maybe not by the thousands per se, but we have a big company that's going to build a 2 million square foot manufacturing facility that we're working with in the Niagara region. We have another very, very large company that's going to be going into St. Catharines for another 100 jobs. The Hearst mine that I went up north to visit, they're saying they're opening another mine for another 100 jobs. So I'll take 100 jobs all day long. It's going to take a little longer. Of course, we want the big companies to come in and employ thousands of people, but we're going to move the ball down the field 1 yard at a time and create an environment for companies to come back into Ontario. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
On your slogan during the campaign and now just opened put up the Ontario Open for Business sign at Sarnia. What does it say about Ontario Open for Business? And second part, did GM mention anything about hydro rates or labor laws or anything like that?
No, they didn't mention anything about hydro rates or labor laws, but we have to tell the world we're open for business because GM has left. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible news, but we have to pick ourselves up, get back on our feet, and be as positive as we can to, again, create the environment for companies to come to Ontario. I've talked to so many companies right across the region. We want them to expand. We don't want them laying people off, and right now, unemployment is relatively low compared to previous years. Gas prices, and I understand oil prices around the world have gone down, but I can say at least we're responsible for 4.5 cents or 4.6 cents to reduce the gas prices. People now are actually taking prices of the gas pump and sending them over to me, and I love seeing that. It's 97.9 up in Aurelia, someone sent me. So we have to. Go ahead.
This decision was made months ago.
Oh, longer than months ago.
Many months ago.
Yeah.
Were you aware?
Absolutely not.
You were not aware?
No, not until yesterday afternoon.
For blaming the Wynne government.
You know, I don't want to point fingers at anyone. Sure, people, I could sit here and blame the high hydro costs, the regulations and everything. I'm not going to. I got to work together with the federal government, with the Durham region, and sit down and come up with a solid game plan. We're already moving forward with job sharing, as I was saying. I want to extend EI from 45 weeks to 50 weeks. So there's a lot of things in the works right now, and we're putting the pedal to the metal, and we're going to be out there talking to the people and engaging. Yes. Last question.
And St. Catharines, what assurances from General Motors have you been given that they will stick around for the long term? What is this government prepared to do to make sure that they will stick around for the long term?
Well, great question, actually. I have to take him at his word. Someone tells me they're going to stick around, there's nothing to worry about, because that came up in the conversation. I think it came up a couple times, Minister, to be reassured, and he reassured us. He also said there's a bright future with the technology side out in Markham too. They're still hiring people there, so it's disappointing for the plant. But again, we have to create the environment, no matter if it's St. Catharines or Ingersoll or anywhere in Ontario, that we're going to take the burden off the backs of companies and off the backs of people. Imagine the carbon tax these people are paying out in Oshawa. We got to fight for the carbon tax. We got to fight for lower hydro rates. We have to make sure that we reduce taxes. We have to get rid of regulations. Well, I'm not. Well, they haven't asked, and I'm not going to cross that bridge until that time comes. But again, I support the people out there, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure they get back on their feet. Out of the 2,600 people, 1,300 people were ready to retire, and they would have retired and collect their pension. Now they're going to retire with a good package, really good package. But I'm worried about all the supply chain. I'm worried about the other 1,300 people that are laid off and what their families are thinking, what their kids are thinking right now. You know, people, so many people say, oh, Doug, you must be stressed out and this and that. Do you want to hear what stress is? Stress is a family that has 3 kids, the spouse is at home, and the other spouse comes home and says, I just lost my job at General Motors. That's stress. That's stress when you don't know where your next mortgage payment's coming from, how you're going to pay the heating or the food. This is nothing compared to the people that are in Oshawa that potentially are losing their job in the next year. That's what stress is. And I want to tell those families, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to support you. I'm going to do everything I can. I'll give you my cell number. You ever want to see me, I'll be out there constantly because I care for those people, and we have to be compassionate for the people that are facing this. It's very, very tough for them. But I want to thank you. We'll keep you informed on a daily basis.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.